The blizzard didn't just howl, it screamed. Inside the frosted ladle, the air smelled of burnt coffee and decades-old grease, a fragile sanctuary against the white fury outside. Declan Ashworth wiped down the counter for what felt like the thousandth time that night, his hands moving through muscle memory, while his mind wandered to places he'd spent 10 years trying to forget. Grenada, October 1983. The screaming, the blood. He pushed the thought away. That was 2 months ago. Ancient history and the mathematics of survival. The clock on the wall read 11:47, Thursday, December 22nd. 3 days until Christmas, though you wouldn't know it from the emptiness of Coldwater, Montana. Population 800 and declining. The kind of town people left, not the kind they came back to. Declan had come back. The radio crackled from its perch above the grill. Local news fighting through the static. Developing story out of Great Falls tonight. Senator Griffin Aldridge's motorcade was attacked approximately 8 p.m. near the Canadian border. The senator is safe, but his 7-year-old son Christopher remains missing. Authorities are calling it a kidnapping. A $5 million reward has been posted for information leading to the boy's safe return. Declan paused mid-wipe. $5 million. That was the kind of money that made people do stupid things. Desperate things. He looked out the window at the swirling white chaos. Nobody was going anywhere tonight. The storm had buried the roads under 4 feet of powder, and the wind chill was pushing 40 below. Missing in this weather meant dead in the 6 hours. Maybe 8 if you were lucky. The boy wouldn't make it to morning. Declan finished closing the register, counted out the day's take. $243. 11 customers. Business was dying slower than he was, but not by much. He locked the bills in the ancient safe beneath the counter, grabbed his coat from the hook by the kitchen door. Time to face the cold. The back door of the diner led to an alley where the supply trucks usually idled. Declan had 3 bags of garbage to dump before he could lock up and make the 2-block walk to his apartment above the hardware store. 2 blocks that felt like 2 miles when the wind was trying to peel the skin off your face. He shouldered the door open. The wind caught it immediately, nearly ripping it from his grip. Ice crystals stung his eyes. He squinted into the maelstrom, hefting the first bag toward the dumpster. That's when he saw it. At first he thought it was a discarded tarp, maybe a pile of rags blown against the brick wall. But tarps didn't have shadows. Rags didn't have the faint, rhythmic rise and fall of a chest fighting for breath. Declan dropped the garbage bag. Jesus Christ. He crossed the distance in 4 strides, his boots crunching through the fresh powder. The shape resolved into clarity as he got closer, a child no more than 7 or 8 curled into a fetal position against the frozen brick. The boy wore an expensive winter coat, the kind with a designer label and goose-down filling. Navy blue with silver piping. Custom made, probably. The kind of coat that cost more than Declan made in a month. The kind of coat a senator's son would wear. Declan knelt, his bad knee, the one he'd torn up in the jump into Grenada, screaming in protest. He pulled off his glove, pressed 2 fingers against the boy's neck. The skin was ice-cold waxy. For a terrible moment, he thought he was too late. Then he felt it. Faint, thready, barely there. A pulse. Training kicked in. The training they drilled into him at Fort Sam Houston, refined in a dozen hellholes from Honduras to Beirut, crystallized in the chaos of Grenada 2 months ago. Check vitals first. Assess the threat. Stabilize and extract. Pulse 45 beats per minute. Way too low. Bradycardia. Respiration shallow, maybe 8 per minute. Skin pale, almost translucent. Lips tinged blue. Classic hypothermia. Core temperature, he couldn't measure it here, but based on presentation, probably 89, maybe 90 degrees. Severe, maybe critical. The boy needed heat. Now, Declan scooped him up. The child was light, frighteningly so. 7 years old should weigh more than this. He carried him through the door, kicked it shut behind them, laid him on the bench of the corner booth, the one hidden from the street by a half-dead fern that had somehow survived 3 Montana winters. The boy's eyes fluttered but didn't open. Declan worked fast. He'd done this before. Hypothermia cases in the mountains during winter warfare training, frostbite victims in the field. You removed wet clothing, wrapped them in dry blankets, gave them warm fluids if they could swallow. You didn't give them hot fluids that could send them into shock. You didn't rub their extremities that could dislodge ice crystals and cause cardiac arrest. You worked methodically. You didn't panic. He stripped off the boy's coat, underneath a wool sweater, designer jeans, leather boots that probably cost $500. Everything high-end, everything soaked through. As he peeled away the sweater, something caught his eye. A medical alert bracelet on the boy's left wrist. Declan held it up to the light. Engraved in block letters, Christopher Aldridge, hemophilia type A. Factor 8 required every 8 to 12 hours. Hemophilia. Declan's jaw tightened. Hemophilia meant the boy's blood didn't clot properly. Any internal bleeding and hypothermia could cause it. The cold making blood vessels brittle could be catastrophic. The factor 8 mentioned on the bracelet was a clotting protein administered by injection. Without it, even a minor bruise could become life-threatening. This wasn't just a missing child. This was a ticking clock. Declan checked his watch. 11:53. If the boy had been in the cold for more than a few hours, if his last factor 8 dose was more than 12 hours ago, if he had any internal bleeding starting, he needed a hospital, fast. But something made Declan pause. He looked at the boy's shoulder where the sweater had pulled away. There was a mark there. Recent, a small incision, maybe a week old, sutured neatly. The kind of incision a surgeon made when placing a medical device. A port for long-term medication delivery, maybe. Or a pacemaker. Except the placement was wrong. Too high on the shoulder, too close to the surface, and the scar was too fresh, too precise. Declan had seen wounds like this before, in the field. When you needed to track someone without their knowledge, you implanted a GPS chip. Small, subcutaneous, powered by body heat, military technology mostly. CIA used them for deep cover assets. Why would a 7-year-old boy have a tracking implant? The phone on the wall rang, shattering the silence. Declan stared at it. Nobody called the diner at midnight. Nobody called the diner at all, really, except for the meat supplier on Tuesdays. It rang again, insistent. He crossed to it, lifted the receiver. Frosted ladle. Silence, then a click, then a dial tone. Wrong number. Had to be. Except Declan didn't believe in coincidences, not anymore. Not after Grenada, where the wrong coordinates had put his team in the middle of a Cuban garrison. Not after learning that sometimes the people who sent you into hell were the same people betting you wouldn't come back. He hung up the phone and dialed 911. 3 rings. Then Cascade County Emergency Services. What is your emergency? This is Declan Ashworth at the Frosted Ladle Diner in Coldwater. I need immediate medical assistance and law enforcement. I have a child here approximately 7 years old, severe hypothermia, possible internal injuries. He matches the description of the Aldridge boy from the news. A pause. Too long. Sir, can you confirm the child's identity? Medical bracelet says Christopher Aldridge, hemophilia. He needs factor 8 in a hospital now. Another pause. Then, sir, remain on the line. I'm transferring you to the FBI field office. The line clicked. More ringing. Then a male voice, calm, professional. Too calm. This is Special Agent Renford, FBI, Great Falls. Mr. Ashworth, is that correct? That's correct. You have the Aldridge boy. I have a boy matching his description. Unconscious, hypothermic, needs immediate medical attention. Has he regained consciousness? Has he spoken? Odd question. The first question should have been about the boy's condition, about medical needs, about getting an ambulance en route. He's unconscious, Declan repeated. He needs a hospital. Of course, Mr. Ashworth. How did you locate the boy? I didn't locate him. He was in the alley behind my diner. I found him while taking out trash. And you're certain nobody else has seen him? The hair on the back of Declan's neck stood up. What kind of question is that? Standard protocol, sir. We need to assess the situation. Now, this is very important. Do not move the boy. Do not call anyone else. Remain exactly where you are. We have a team en route. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes from Great Falls in a blizzard that had closed every road in the county. Impossible. Agent Renford, the boy needs a hospital now. Not in 20 minutes, now. Sir, we have medical personnel with the response team. Moving him in this weather would be more dangerous than waiting for our arrival. Do you understand? Declan understood. He understood that something was very, very wrong. I understand, he said and hung up. He stood there for a moment, hands still on the receiver, mind racing through scenarios. In Grenada, when the operation went sideways, it had started with bad intelligence, then bad orders, then good men dying for reasons that made sense only to people in air-conditioned offices 1,000 miles away. This had the same smell. He turned back to the booth. The boy Christopher was still unconscious, wrapped in the spare blankets Declan kept for the 2 homeless men who sometimes slept in the storage room when the weather turned lethal. His breathing was steadier now, color returning slowly to his cheeks. Declan checked his pulse again, 55 beats per minute, better. Still not good, but better. He returned to the shoulder incision. Using a clean knife from the kitchen and the first aid kit he kept under the register, He made a small exploratory cut along the scar line. The tissue was still pink, healing well. Beneath the skin, maybe a centimeter deep, he felt something hard. Rectangular, the size of a grain of rice. He worked carefully using tweezers from the kit. The object came free with minimal bleeding. He held it up to the light. A chip. Black polymer casing. LED, indicator blinking green on one end. Active transmission. Whoever put this in the boy was tracking him. Right now. Which meant they knew exactly where he was. Which meant the FBI, or whoever had answered that 911 call, knew exactly where he was. 20 minutes, they'd said. They were probably already here. Mr. Declan's head snapped around. The boy was awake, eyes open. Pale blue eyes, red-rimmed from crying or cold or both. He was looking directly at Declan. "It's okay," Declan said, keeping his voice soft. "You're safe. You're in a diner in Coldwater. Do you know your name, Christopher?" The voice was small, scared. "Christopher Aldridge." "That's right. Do you remember what happened to you?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. "They took me from the car when we stopped." "Who took you?" "Men, with masks. They put me in a van, gave me a shot. I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was in a cabin, in the woods." "How long were you in the cabin?" "I don't know. Days, maybe. They kept giving me shots to make me sleep, but I heard them talking." "What did they say?" Christopher's breath hitched. They said my father would pay, that he'd do anything to get me back, that the protocol was working." Protocol. There was that word again. "Who were they, Christopher?" "I don't know, but then Uncle Nate came." "Uncle Nate?" "Uncle Nathaniel, my dad's brother. He's in the Army. He said he was rescuing me, but—" The boy trailed off, fresh tears spilling. "But what?" "But I heard him talking on the phone when he thought I was asleep. He said it was almost time, that the timing had to be perfect, that I had to be found in the right place at the right time, and then he—" Christopher touched his shoulder exactly where the incision was. "He put something in me, said it was medicine, but it hurt. And it wasn't medicine, I know it wasn't." Declan's blood ran cold. "Where's Uncle Nate now?" "He drove me here, to this town. He stopped the car in the alley, gave me another shot, said I'd wake up soon, said someone would find me, that I'd be a hero." "Did he say why?" Christopher shook his head. "But I heard him on the phone again, before the shove. He said, 'The asset is in position. Initiate Coldwater Protocol.'" Asset, protocol, those weren't words you use for a rescue operation. Those were words you use for an operation. A planned operation. The pieces clicked together in Declan's mind with sickening clarity. This wasn't a kidnapping gone wrong. This was a kidnapping gone exactly according to plan. Christopher Aldridge had been taken, held, implanted with a tracker, and deliberately placed in Coldwater, Montana, in a blizzard, in the alley behind a diner owned by a man nobody in town paid much attention to anymore. But why? What did a washed-up combat medic and a senator's son have to do with a protocol before he could process further headlights swept across the front windows of the diner? 3 sets of headlights, big vehicles, SUVs. They'd arrived. "Christopher," Declan said quietly, "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" The boy nodded, eyes wide. "Hide. Under this table. Don't make a sound. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "But now." Christopher scrambled under the booth's table, pulling the blanket with him. Declan arranged the fern to obscure the view, then moved to the front of the diner. Through the window, he could see the SUVs pulling up. Black, government plates, no markings. The doors opened. 4 men climbed out of the first vehicle. 2 from the second, none from the third. The lead man was tall, mid-50s, wearing an expensive overcoat that looked absurd in the Montana wilderness. Even from a distance, even through the snow, Declan recognized him from the news broadcasts. Senator Griffin Aldridge. Behind him came a younger man, maybe mid-40s, military-bearing, evident even in civilian clothes. Army service cap, decorations visible on his coat collar, a face that looked like a harder, colder version of the senator's. Had to be the brother. Uncle Nate, Major Nathaniel Aldridge. They approached the door. Declan unlocked it, stepped back. The senator entered first, brushing snow from his shoulders. His eyes swept the diner, professional, assessing cold. Not the eyes of a father about to be reunited with his missing son. The eyes of a man conducting business. "Mr. Ashworth, I presume?" "Senator Aldridge. Thank you for calling this in. My son, is he here?" "He's here." "May I see him?" Declan hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse to demand answers, to ask why a father's first reaction wasn't to run to his child. But instincts didn't matter against federal authority. He gestured to the booth. The senator moved past him. Major Nathaniel followed along with two others, security probably or FBI's, hard to tell without seeing badges. They surrounded the booth where Christopher had been lying, where the blankets now lay empty. The senator's expression didn't change. "Mr. Ashworth, where is my son?" "He was just here. I searched the building," the major said quietly. His voice had the clipped precision of career military. Orders given, expected to be followed without question. The two security men spread out, one heading for the kitchen, the other for the storage room. Declan calculated angles. Two men searching, the senator and the major between him and the front door. The back exit led to the alley into the blizzard, with Christopher. If the boy had run, he wouldn't last 15 minutes in that cold. "Found him." The call came from the storage room. Seconds later, one of the security men emerged carrying Christopher. The boy was struggling, kicking, crying. "Let me go! Let me go!" The senator moved forward. His face arranged itself into an expression of relief that looked rehearsed. "Christopher, thank God. You're safe now." "No," Christopher screamed. "I'm not safe. You're not safe." He was looking directly at his father, but his words were directed at Declan. "Christopher, you've been through a terrible ordeal," the senator said, his voice taking on a soothing tone. "You're confused, traumatized, but you're safe now. We're taking you home." "I don't want to go home." Major Nathaniel stepped forward. His face was gentler than the senator's, almost kind. "Uncle to nephew, family." "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "It's me, Uncle Nate. Remember I came to get you. You're okay now." Christopher's reaction was immediate and visceral. He began to hyperventilate, thrashing in the security man's grip. "No, not Uncle Nate. He's the one who—" "Christopher, calm down!" The senator's voice hardened. "You're making a scene." "Mr. Ashworth," Christopher screamed, reaching toward Declan. "Don't let them take me. Please, he's the one who put me in the cabin. He's the one." The major moved with startling speed. His hand went to his coat pocket, emerged with a syringe. "Wait," Declan started forward. Two things happened simultaneously. The major injected something into Christopher's arm. The boy's protest cut off mid-scream, his body going limp. And Declan found himself staring down the barrel of a Glock 19 held steady in the hand of one of the security men. "Don't move, sir." The diner went quiet. The only sound was the wind howling outside and Christopher's now shallow breathing. The senator looked at Declan. His expression had changed. No more concerned father. This was the face of a man used to getting his way, used to people who didn't ask inconvenient questions. "Mr. Ashworth, I appreciate your concern for my son's welfare. Truly. But Christopher has been through a traumatic experience. He's been fed lies by his captors. He's frightened and confused. What he needs now is professional care." "He needs a hospital," Declan said, keeping his voice level, despite the gun pointed at his chest. "He has hemophilia. He needs factor VIII. When was his last dose?" The major answered. 16 hours ago. We have medication in the vehicle. He'll be fine." 16 hours is past the threshold. He needs it now. "We're aware of his medical needs, Mr. Ashworth." The senator's tone indicated the conversation was over. "Major Aldridge is himself a trained medical officer. Christopher will receive proper care." Declan looked at the boy unconscious in the security man's arms, looked at the major, who was returning the syringe to his pocket, looked at the senator, who was already moving toward the door. Every fiber of his being said this was wrong. But what could he do? These were federal officials, the boy's father and uncle, men with authority, with power, with resources. He was a washed-up combat medic running a failing diner in the middle of nowhere, Montana. He had no standing, no authority, no right to interfere. "We'll be taking our leave now," the senator said. "The roads are dangerous, and we need to get Christopher to proper medical care. I trust you'll keep the details of tonight's events to yourself, for my son's sake. The press would have a field day with his episode, you understand." It wasn't a question. Declan said nothing. The senator nodded to the security man holding the gun. The weapon disappeared back into its holster. The group moved toward the door, Christopher limp and silent, in the arms of his captor. No, his rescuer, his family. At the threshold, Major Nathaniel paused, turned back. "Mr. Ashworth, a word of advice. Stay out of federal business. Men who meddle in things they don't understand tend to have unfortunate accidents." The threat was delivered with a smile. Then they were gone. The door closed. The bell above it chimed a cheerful and congruous sound. The SUVs started up headlights, cutting through the snow and pulled away into the blizzard. Declan stood alone in the empty diner. He looked at the booth where Christopher had been, at the blankets, at the spot on the floor where something small and metallic caught his eye. He crossed to the booth, knelt. There, wedged between the bench and the wall, partially hidden by the fern's pot, was the GPS chip, still blinking green, still transmitting. Christopher's hand had been near the bench edge when the security man grabbed him. The boy had deliberately palmed the chip, wedged it where Declan would find it. Smart kid, brave kid. Declan picked it up, held it in his palm. This small piece of technology represented a dozen federal crimes if he kept it. Interfering with a federal investigation, tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice. But it also represented the only proof he had that something was wrong. He pocketed it. Then he noticed something else. On the table, written in the condensation that had formed on the wood from Christopher's wet clothes, were two words. Finger traced. Deliberate. Help me. Declan stared at those words for a long moment. In Grenada, he'd followed orders. He'd done what he was told, and 3 good men had died because the intelligence was wrong, or because it was deliberately wrong. He'd never found out which. He'd just carried the bodies home and tried to forget their faces. He couldn't forget Christopher's face. The phone rang again. Declan crossed to it, lifted the receiver. Yeah, Declan, it's Silas. Silas Brennan, tracker to everyone who'd served with him. Former ranger now working as a wilderness guide and rescue coordinator for Glacier National Park. One of the few people from Declan's old life who still took his calls. Silas, it's late. I know. Listen, I just heard something on the federal frequency. There's chatter about the Aldridge kid, about Coldwater, about you. What kind of chatter? The kind that says you're about to have a very bad week if you don't keep your head down. Deck, what the hell is going on? Declan looked at the 2 words on the table, at the blinking chip in his pocket, at the empty diner that suddenly felt like the opening move in a game he didn't know he was playing. I don't know yet, he said, but I'm going to find out. That's a mistake. Probably at they'll bury you. They can try. A long pause, then you need backup. I need information. Can you access classified files quietly? Depends on what you're looking for. Everything on Major Nathaniel Aldridge. Army intelligence. Stationed where doing what last 3 years. Everything on Senator Griffin Aldridge. Armed Services Committee. What bills he's pushing. What he's blocking. And anything about something called the Coldwater Protocol. Jesus, December, that's... I know what it is. Can you do it? Another pause. Then give me 48 hours. But Declan, whatever you're stepping into, it's bigger than you. Bigger than both of us. A kid asked me for help, Silas. I can't walk away from that. I know. That's why I'm worried. Silas paused again. Listen, there is someone else you should talk to. Colonel Vesper Hartwell, Army Intelligence. She's been investigating the Major for 6 months. I've been feeding her information. She's solid December, one of the good ones. How do I reach her? You don't. She'll reach you. I'm calling her after we hang up. Expect her tomorrow morning. 8 a.m., your diner. Silas's voice lowered. Be careful, brother. The people you're going after, they don't play by the rules. They don't leave witnesses. Neither did we in Grenada. Yeah, and look how that turned out. The line went dead. Declan hung up the phone. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage. Inside, the diner was warm and quiet and empty. He thought about Grenada, about the men who hadn't made it home, about the promises he'd made to himself after that, about staying out of other people's wars, about living a quiet life where the only thing he had to worry about was whether the coffee was fresh and the grill was clean. He thought about a 7-year-old boy with pale blue eyes and a medical bracelet and a terror so profound it had cut through sedatives and exhaustion to scream for help. Declan locked the door, turned off the lights, walked to the back office where he kept the things he'd promised himself he'd never need again. The footlocker was under the desk combination lock, rusted but functional. He spun the dial, clicked it open. Inside, a Colt 1911 cleaned and oiled and loaded, 2 spare magazines, a tactical knife, a first aid kit that went well beyond civilian requirements, a radio military frequency encrypted, dog tags he should have turned in but hadn't, a photograph of 3 men in fatigues grinning at the camera rifles slung over their shoulders, palm trees in the background. 2 of those men were dead. The third was looking at his reflection in a window, wondering if he was about to join them. Declan loaded the pistol, chambered around, tucked it into the small of his back. Tomorrow, Colonel Hartwell would arrive at 8 a.m. Tomorrow, he'd learn how deep the conspiracy went. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Tonight, he loaded his weapon. and waited for dawn. The diner was dark, the storm was loud, and somewhere out there in the night, a boy was being taken somewhere he didn't want to go by people he was terrified of for reasons that made sense only to men who dealt in protocols and assets and acceptable losses. Declan had been an acceptable loss once. In Grenada, when the intelligence was bad and the coordinates were wrong and 3 good men died. He'd survived, but survival wasn't the same as living. Christopher Aldridge had asked for help. And Declan Ashworth, for the first time in 2 months, felt something other than the numb gray exhaustion that had defined his days since coming home. He felt purpose. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. The blizzard screamed. And in the darkness of a diner in Coldwater, Montana, a man made a decision that would change everything. He was going to get that boy back, or die trying. 8 a.m. Friday, December 23rd. Declan had spent the night watching the door of the Colt on the counter next to the coffee pot. No sleep, just black coffee and the weight of Christopher's 2 words traced in condensation: help me. The blizzard had passed, leaving Coldwater buried under snow that glittered like broken glass in the weak winter sun. He'd opened the diner at 6, same as always, made coffee, fired up the grill, pretended that the world hadn't tilted sideways 12 hours ago. 3 customers trickled in by 7. Ranch hands from the Petersons spread looking for breakfast before heading out to check on cattle. They didn't mention the senator's son. Didn't mention the federal vehicles that had rolled through town in the middle of the night. In Coldwater, you learn not to ask questions about things that weren't your business. Declan served eggs and bacon and kept his mouth shut, but his mind was racing. The GPS chip sat in his pocket, wrapped in aluminum foil to block the signal. He'd spent half the night examining it under the magnifying lamp from his toolbox. Military grade, definitely. Real-time tracking with a range of about 200 miles. The kind of device you used when you needed to know exactly where an asset was at all times. Asset, that's what the major had called Christopher on the phone. Not nephew, not victim. Asset. At 8:15, the bell above the door chimed. Declan looked up from the grill. A woman stood in the doorway brushing snow from her coat. Late 50s gray hair cut military short, sharp eyes that cataloged everything in the diner in about 3 seconds. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, hiking boots, a canvas jacket, but moved with the unmistakable bearing of someone who'd spent decades in uniform. She walked to the counter, sat on the stool directly in front of Declan. Coffee, please. Black. He poured it. She wrapped both hands around the mug, warming them. You're Ashworth. It wasn't a question. Who's asking? She pulled out a wallet, flipped it open. Military ID, active duty, Army intelligence. Colonel Vesper Hartwell. I'm asking, she said. And before you decide whether to talk to me, you should know that I'm probably the only person in the entire intelligence apparatus who's on your side right now. Declan set down the coffee pot carefully. I don't know what you're talking about. Christopher Aldridge, the GPS chip that went mysteriously offline 46 hours ago. The fact that Senator Aldridge filed a formal complaint with the FBI, alleging that you interfered with a federal operation and may have compromised national security. The ranch hands at the corner booth were studiously ignoring the conversation, but Declan could see the shift in their body language. Ears perked, attention focused. Storage room, Declan said quietly, in the back. Hartwell followed him through the kitchen to the small storage area where he kept supplies and the occasional homeless person who needed a warm place to sleep. He closed the door. Talk, he said. I knew your CO in Grenada, Hartwell said. Colonel Marcus Brennan, good man. Bad intelligence got his operation compromised. You and 2 others were the only survivors. 3 others died. I know, I wrote the after-action report. The intelligence came through Major Nathaniel Aldridge's office. He was the liaison between CIA and Army intelligence for Caribbean operations at the time. Declan felt something cold settle in his chest. You're saying the major deliberately fed bad intelligence. I'm saying the intelligence was bad. Whether it was deliberate or incompetent, I never found out. The investigation was shut down from above. Senator Aldridge sits on armed services. He has a lot of friends in a lot of places. Why are you telling me this? Hartwell took a sip of her coffee. Because 2 nights ago, a 7-year-old boy with hemophilia was placed in your alley in the middle of a blizzard. Placed, Mr. Ashworth. Not lost, not abandoned. Placed. With a GPS tracker in his shoulder that transmitted his location to 3 separate receivers. One at the senator's office in D.C., one at Major Aldridge's station at Fort Meade, and one at CIA headquarters in Langley. Yeah, white boy, that's what I'm trying to figure out. But here's what I know. The senator has been pushing a bill through armed services for the last 6 months. It's buried in the defense appropriations package. Most people haven't even noticed it. But if it passes, it authorizes something called Odin Operational Defense Intelligence Network. Essentially, it creates a new intelligence agency that reports directly to a select committee in Congress. Not the president, not the Joint Chiefs, Congress. Again, that's unconstitutional. That's the point. The senator argues it's oversight, checks and balances, making sure the executive branch doesn't run rogue operations without congressional knowledge. But what it really does is give a handful of senators, including Griffin Aldridge, direct control over Black Ops funding and authorization. Declan processed this. And the kidnapping creates a narrative. Senator's son kidnapped by unknown hostiles, possibly Soviet sympathizers, the story goes. Father goes through hell to get him back. When the boy is found safe, the senator becomes a sympathetic figure. Public support surges. The defense bill he's been pushing gets fast-tracked through committee on a wave of "we need better intelligence to protect our family's" sentiment. That's insane. That's politics. Hartwell set down her mug. But here's where it gets complicated. The senator didn't orchestrate the kidnapping. His brother did. But Griffin found out within 24 hours and made a choice. He decided to let it play out because it served his political goals. Major Nathaniel Aldridge has been running his own operations through CIA channels for the last 3 years. Operations that the official record doesn't show. Ghost funding, ghost assets. And Christopher was supposed to be found by a state trooper on Highway 89 30 miles from here. There was supposed to be a heroic rescue, press coverage, a tearful reunion. But the kid ended up in my alley instead. Exactly, something went wrong with the major's plan, and now they're scrambling to contain it, which means you're a loose end, Mr. Ashworth. And loose ends have a way of disappearing in this business. Then why are you here? Why tell me any of this? Hartwell met his eyes. Because I don't like seeing children used as pawns. And because I think you're the kind of man who won't walk away from this, even if walking away is the smart play. So I'm going to give you a choice. You can take my card, get on the next bus out of Montana, and forget any of this ever happened. Or you can help me figure out what the Coldwater Protocol actually is, why it required a senator's son to be traumatized and drugged and tracked like an animal, and how we stop whatever's coming next. What makes you think there's a next? Because the bill hasn't passed yet, and because the tracker in Christopher's shoulder is still transmitting, which means they still need him for something. Declan pulled the GPS chip from his pocket, unwrapped the foil. This tracker, Hartwell stared at it. You took it out. The kid deliberately hid it, palmed it when they grabbed him. I found it after they left. Jesus Christ. Do you have any idea what you've done that's evidence? She stopped, took a breath. Actually, that's brilliant. If they think the tracker is still in the boy, they won't know we're on to them. Can you turn it back on? Already tried. It's keyed to biometric data. Body temperature, pulse. It only transmits when it's in a living host. Then we need to make them think it's still in Christopher. Hartwell pulled out a phone dialed. Tracker, it's Hartwell. I need a favor. Can you jury-rig a GPS transmitter to mimic human vitals? Good. I'm in Coldwater. Get here. She hung up. Silas Brennan, he worked with you in Grenada. You've already talked to him. I've been investigating the major for 6 months. Your friend Brennan has been feeding me information on ghost operations in the Rockies. He's good. Paranoid, but good. The pieces were coming together, but the picture they formed was getting uglier by the second. Where's Christopher now? Declan asked. The official story is he's at Walter Reed Medical Center recovering. But Walter Reed has no record of his admission. My guess he's at a secure location. Probably Fort Meade or Camp Peary, somewhere the major has direct access. We need to find him. We will. But first we need to understand what we're walking into. The Coldwater Protocol isn't just about the kidnapping. It's about something bigger. The major has been moving assets into the Rockies for months. Weapons, equipment, personnel, all off book, all untraceable. For what purpose? That's what we're wanting to find out. The door to the storage room opened. The ranch hands were leaving dropping bills on the counter, not looking back. When they were gone, Hartwell continued. The major served in Lebanon, Beirut specifically. He was there during the barracks bombing in '83. Lost half his unit, 23 men. After that, something changed in him. He started writing papers on preemptive intelligence, on the necessity of operating outside congressional oversight for the sake of national security. He argued that the bureaucracy was getting soldiers killed, that we needed operatives who could act without authorization, without accountability. Sounds like a recipe for war crimes. Or worse. My concern is that the Cold Water Protocol is a proof of concept, a demonstration. If the major can successfully run an operation that manipulates Congress into authorizing his new intelligence agency, he proves that the system is broken, that the only way to protect America is to work outside the system, by kidnapping a child, by doing whatever it takes. Hartwell's voice was hard. And here's the worst part. Griffin Aldridge knows his brother orchestrated the kidnapping, but he doesn't care because it gets him what he wants: power, control, a legacy as the man who reformed American intelligence. Declan felt sick. How do we stop them? We find Christopher. We get him to safety, and we expose the protocol before the defense bill comes to a vote, which gives us about 72 hours. 3 days, the same timeline the major had used for the kidnapping. I'm in, Declan said. Hartwell nodded. Then we need to move fast. Tracker will be here in 2 hours. In the meantime, I need you to tell me everything Christopher said to you. Every detail. The boy might have information he doesn't even know is important. Declan walked her through it. The cabin in the woods, the injections to keep Christopher sedated, Uncle Nate's phone conversations about timing and positioning, the phrase asset in position, the surgical implant, the terror in the boy's eyes when he saw the major. Hartwell took notes on a small pad. The cabin, she said when he finished. Did Christopher say anything about where it was, any details? Just that it was in the woods. He was drugged most of the time. Think anything, sounds, smells, anything that might narrow down a location. Declan closed his eyes, replayed the conversation. Christopher's voice small and scared. They kept giving me shots, but I heard them talking. What else had the boy said? Wait, he mentioned hearing them, the men, but he also said something about machines or engines. He said it was loud sometimes, like trucks but different. Different how? I don't know, he was 7. He didn't have the vocabulary. Hartwell's eyes sharpened. Helicopters. Maybe. Fort Harrison is 30 miles north of here. It's a training facility. Helicopter operations. If the major was using it as a base for his ghost operations, it would make sense. Close to the Canadian border. Remote. Easy to move equipment in and out without drawing attention. So we go to Fort Harrison. Not we. Me. I have clearance. You're a civilian. And right now you're a civilian with a target on your back. You need to stay here. Stay visible. Act normal. If they think you're spooked, they'll move on you. I'm not sitting this out. You're not sitting anything out. You're the distraction. While I'm at Fort Harrison digging through records, you're going to keep that GPS chip warm and moving. Make them think Christopher is still in Coldwater. Lead them on a wild goose chase. How dare you? Tracker will show you he's good with field improvisation. In the meantime, she handed him a business card. It was blank except for a phone number written in pencil. This reaches me. Encrypted line. If anything happens, you call. Understood. Understood. Hartwell finished her coffee, stood. One more thing. Trust no one, not the FBI, not local law enforcement, not anyone who claims to be helping. The major has operatives everywhere. Some of them don't even know they're working for him. How will I know who to trust? You won't. That's the point. She left through the back door, disappearing into the Montana snow, like she'd never been there at all. Declan returned to the diner. It was empty now, 9:30 on a Friday morning, 3 days before Christmas. He should be prepping for the lunch rush that wouldn't come. Should be thinking about closing early about the long weekend ahead. Instead, he was thinking about a 7-year-old boy in a secure facility somewhere surrounded by people who saw him as an asset, not a child. The bell above the door chimed. A man entered, late 30s, lean and weathered, with the kind of tan that came from spending months at a time outdoors. He wore a heavy parka and carried a duffel bag over one shoulder. Silas, Declan said. December. Silas Tracker Brennan crossed to the counter, dropped the duffel. Heard you got yourself into some trouble. Trouble found me. It usually does. Silas unzipped the bag, pulled out what looked like a small thermos. Colonel Hartwell said you needed this operational. GPS transmitter, right? That's right. Silas took the chip from Declan, examined it under a jeweler's loupe. Military grade, M72 series. We use these in Lebanon for tracking high-value targets. You power it with body heat 98.6 degrees, pulse rate minor electrical signals from muscle movement. It's sophisticated, but not impossible to fake. He opened the thermos. Inside was a complex assembly of wires, batteries, and what looked like a heating element. This is a biometric simulator. It'll mimic human vitals well enough to keep the transmitter active. You put the chip in here, seal it up, and it'll broadcast for about 72 hours before the battery dies. Long enough for whatever Hartwell has planned. She's going to Fort Harrison, looking for Christopher. Silas nodded. I figured. That's where the major has been running operations. I've been watching supply deliveries, medical equipment, pharmaceuticals, the kind of stuff you'd need if you were holding someone who required constant care. Like a hemophiliac. Exactly. Silas inserted the chip into the simulator, made some adjustments. The device beeped softly. It's live. Now we need to move it around, make them think Christopher is mobile, active. If they think he's stationary, they'll get suspicious. How do we move it? Creatively. Silas grinned. It was the same grin he'd worn in Grenada right before suggesting they infiltrate a Cuban garrison by pretending to be lost tourists. You know anyone who makes deliveries, Postal Service, UPS? Marvin Cobb. He runs the mail route. Hits every town in a 60-mile radius. Perfect. We put the tracker in his truck. He drives around all day. The signal moves naturally. They track it. They think Christopher is being moved between locations. Keeps them confused. Buys us time. Bomb. It was insane. It might work. What about you? Declan asked. What are you doing while Hartwell's at Fort Harrison and I'm babysitting a fake GPS signal? Silas's grin faded. I'm going to the cabin. What cabin? The one where they held Christopher. I've been tracking the major's movements for months. 6 weeks ago, there was unusual activity at an old ranger station near Glacier. Helicopter traffic, vehicle convoys. Then it went dark. My guess. That's where they kept the boy before staging the rescue. Why go there? Because people get sloppy. They leave evidence. And evidence is what we need if we're going to burn the major's operation to the ground. Declan studied his old friend. Silas looked tired. Older than his 38 years, but his eyes were sharp focused. This wasn't just a favor. This was personal. You lost someone, Declan said quietly. In Lebanon, the barracks bombing. Silas's jaw tightened. My brother, Daniel, he was 22, fresh out of boot, wanted to serve his country, died because nobody bothered to tell him the intelligence about that building was compromised, because some desk jockey in D.C. decided it wasn't worth evacuating. And you think the major was that desk jockey? I know he was. I've spent 6 months proving it. But every time I get close, the investigation gets shut down. Files disappear. Witnesses refuse to talk. The major has protection at the highest levels. So you're going after him anyway. I'm going after the truth. If it burns the major in the process, that's just bonus. Silas zipped up the duffel. You should know December. This isn't a sanctioned operation. Hartwell is sticking her neck out. If this goes sideways, we're all getting court-martialed. Or worse. I'm a civilian. Can't court-martial me. No, they'll just make you disappear. Black site, enhanced interrogation. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cell somewhere and nobody will ever know what happened to you. Sounds like a Tuesday, Silas laughed. It was a bitter sound. I missed this, the gallows humor, the stupid bravery. You know what I didn't miss? The part where good men die for bad reasons. Then let's make sure we're the good reasons this time. They spent the next hour coordinating. Marvin Cobb was easy to convince. $50 and a sob story about needing to track a package, got the biometric simulator hidden in his mail truck. By noon, the fake GPS signal was mobile broadcasting Christopher's supposed location as it moved through Coldwater, then north toward the Canadian border. Silas left for Glacier at 1 p.m. Hartwell called at 2 to confirm she was at Fort Harrison, working her way through personnel records. And Declan waited. The lunch rush never materialized. By 3 p.m., the diner was empty again. He closed early, locked up, walked the 2 blocks to his apartment. The temperature had dropped. The sky was the color of old bruises. Another storm coming, the radio said. Heavy snow expected by nightfall. Perfect weather for bad decisions. Declan climbed the stairs to his apartment, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and knew immediately that someone had been there. Nothing obvious, nothing moved. But the air smelled wrong. A faint trace of cologne, expensive. The kind of cologne a senator might wear. Or his brother. Declan's hand went to the Colt at his back. He cleared the apartment methodically. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, empty. But on the kitchen table there was an envelope, plain manila, unsealed. Inside a single photograph. Christopher Aldridge. Sitting in what looked like a hospital room. White walls, medical equipment in the background. The boy was awake, looking at the camera. His expression was blank. Drug, probably. Written on the back of the photo in neat block letters, "The boy is safe, leave it alone." Declan set the photo down carefully. They'd been in his home, while he was downstairs, while he was talking to Silas. They'd walked in, left their message, walked out. The message was clear. We can reach you anytime, anywhere. Stand down. Declan picked up the phone, dialed the number Hartwell had given him. 3 rings, then talk. They were in my apartment, left a photo of Christopher, warning me off. A pause. Are you safe? For now, but they're watching. They know I'm involved. Then we need to move faster. I found something at Fort Harrison. Major Aldridge has been requisitioning medical supplies for the last 2 months. Specifically factor VIII concentrate, enough to treat a severe hemophiliac for 6 months. Why would he need 6 months worth? That's what I'm trying to figure out, but here's the concerning part. The requisitions were approved by someone in the Senate Armed Services Committee, someone with access to classified medical protocols. The senator's signature is on the authorization forms, which means Griffin Aldridge has known about his brother's plans from the beginning, maybe even helped fund them. Declan looked at the photograph again. Christopher's blank eyes, the sterile room, the sense of a child trapped in a machine he couldn't understand. What are they planning? I don't know yet, but I found a reference in the Major's files to something called Operation Weathervane. It's scheduled for March 1984, 3 months from now, and it requires a sustained proof of capability. Proof of what capability? That's what Silas is going to find out. If that cabin has any records, any documentation, it might tell us what Weathervane actually is. We're running out of time. I know, which is why I'm authorizing direct action. Tonight I'm going into the Major's office at Fort Harrison, his personal files. If he's keeping records on Weathervane, that's where they'll be. That's a court-martial. Only if I get caught. Hartwell's voice was steel. Stay alert. Keep your weapon close. If they left a photo, they might come back with more than a warning. The line went dead. Declan sat at his kitchen table, the photo in front of him, the weight of the Colt pressing against his spine. Outside, the first snow of the new storm began to fall. He thought about Grenada, about the moment when the operation went bad, when the coordinates turned out to be wrong and his team walked into an ambush. The moment when he realized that someone somewhere had decided they were acceptable losses. 3 men had died that day. Declan had survived by sheer luck, or maybe by cowardice. He'd never been sure which. But Christopher Aldridge didn't have the luxury of luck. He was 7 years old. He had hemophilia. He was trapped in a system that saw him as a tool, not a person. And Declan was the only one who'd heard him scream. The phone rang. Declan grabbed it. Ashworth, it's Silas. The connection was bad, crackling with static. I'm at the cabin. Dec, you need to hear this. What did you find? Documents? Files? The Major kept records of everything. The kidnapping, the staging, the protocol. Silas's voice dropped. Dec, it's worse than we thought. Christopher wasn't the first. There were others, test cases, children of politicians, military officers, diplomats. They've been running this operation for 2 years. How many children? At least 6, maybe more. All of them returned safely to their families. All of them used to manipulate their parents into supporting specific legislation or military actions. Jesus Christ. And it gets worse. Operation Weathervane isn't about intelligence reform. It's about creating a shadow network of operatives who can act without oversight. The Major wants to build his own private army, and he's using traumatized children to blackmail their parents into funding it. Declan's grip on the phone tightened. Where's Christopher now? Really, according to the files, he's at a facility called Site 17. It's not on any official map, but based on the coordinates listed here, it's about 40 miles northeast of Fort Harrison, middle of nowhere, heavily guarded. Can we get to him? Not without help. The place is designed to be impregnable. But Dec, there's something else. The files mention a failsafe. If the protocol is compromised, if anyone tries to expose it, there's a contingency plan. What kind of contingency, Brian? It's called severance, and it means exactly what you think it means. They eliminate everyone involved. The operatives, the witnesses, the children. All of them. The words hung in the air like smoke. How do we stop it? We don't. Not alone. We need proof. We need to get these files to someone who can't be bought or threatened. Someone with enough authority to bring down the Major and everyone protecting him. Hartwell. Hartwell can help. But even she might not be enough. We need to go public. Press, Congress, make it so big they can't bury it. That'll take time. We don't have time. According to the files, the defense bill votes on December 27th, 4 days from now. If it passes, the cold water protocol becomes official policy, and every child they've used, including Christopher, becomes a permanent liability. 4 days. Declan looked at the photograph on his table, at the boy's empty eyes. I'm going to Site 17, he said. Dec, that's suicide. Then you better get those files to Hartwell. Make sure someone knows what happened if I don't make it back. God damn it, Dec. Christopher asked me for help. I'm not walking away. He hung up before Silas could argue further. Outside, the storm was intensifying. Wind rattled the windows. Snow fell in thick, swirling curtains. Declan went to the footlocker, pulled out the tactical gear. The radio, the knife, the extra magazines for the Colt. He wasn't a soldier anymore. Hadn't been since Grenada. But some skills you never forgot. Some instincts never died. He loaded his pack, checked his weapon, wrote a short note and left it on the kitchen table in case he didn't come back. The note said, "For Christopher." Then Declan Ashworth walked out into the storm, leaving behind the safety of his quiet life, stepping once more into the darkness where good men went to fight bad wars. He didn't know if he'd survive, but he knew he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try. The snow covered his tracks within minutes, and somewhere 40 miles to the northeast in a facility that didn't exist on any map, a 7-year-old boy sat in a white room and waited for someone to remember he was more than an asset. He was a child, and children deserved to be saved. The drive to Site 17 took 3 hours through the worst storm Declan had seen in a decade. Highway 89 was buried under fresh powder. The truck, a battered Ford F-150 he'd borrowed from the diner's supplier without asking, fishtailed through turns headlights, barely cutting through the white wall ahead. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against ice buildup. Declan drove with the Colt on the passenger seat and the radio scanning military frequencies. Most of it was routine chatter, weather advisories, training schedules. Nothing about a compromised black site or a missing child. But at the 2-hour mark, something changed. A burst of encrypted traffic. Too fast to decode, but the urgency was unmistakable. Then silence. Complete radio blackout across all military bands. Somehow they knew Silas had found the cabin. Knew Hartwell was digging through files. Knew the cold water protocol was compromised, which meant severance was already in motion. Declan pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck's engine screamed in protest, but he didn't ease off. If they were eliminating witnesses, Christopher had hours at most, maybe minutes. The coordinates Silas had pulled from the major's files led to an access road 15 miles past the last town. No signs, no markers, just a gap in the trees that could have been a logging trail or a fire road, or nothing at all. Declan took it. The road climbed, steep switchbacks carved into the mountainside, barely wide enough for one vehicle. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches heavy with snow. If another truck came down, there'd be nowhere to go but over the edge. No one came down. At the 3-mile mark, Declan killed the headlights and pulled off into a small clearing. The rest of the approach would be on foot. Vehicles made noise, left tracks, drew attention. He geared up, tactical vest over his heavy coat, spare magazines, radio clip to his belt earpiece in. The Colt in a thigh holster where he could reach it fast, knife on his other hip, flashlight, first aid kit, everything he'd need for a quick extraction or a last stand. The temperature had dropped to 10 below. Wind chill made it feel like 30. Declan's breath frosted in the air, crystallizing on his beard. His bad knee ached, the one he'd torn up in Grenada, but he ignored it. Pain was just information. You could file it away and deal with it later, if there was a later. He started walking. The road continued up for another mile, then leveled out onto a plateau. Through the trees, Declan could make out lights. Not many, maybe 6 or 7 sources. Low intensity shielded. The kind of lighting you used when you didn't want to be seen from the air. He dropped to a crouch, moved closer. Site 17 wasn't impressive. A cluster of prefab buildings arranged in a rough square, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Guard towers at 2 corners unmanned. Single vehicle gate closed. No visible sentries, but that didn't mean anything. Modern security relied on cameras and sensors, not men standing in the cold. Declan circled the perimeter, staying in the tree line. The fence was 12 feet high, but the real problem was what he couldn't see. Pressure sensors in the ground, motion detectors, infrared cameras. A facility this isolated would have layers of security designed to stop exactly what he was attempting. But security systems had weaknesses. They always did. He found his entry point on the north side where a drainage culvert ran under the fence. Too small for an adult, but the fence there crossed a natural depression filled with runoff from the snow. The ground was saturated, soft. Declan pulled out his knife, started digging. It took 20 minutes to create a gap under the fence large enough to squeeze through. His hands went numb despite the gloves. Ice water soaked through his pants. But he worked methodically, enlarging the space inch by inch until he could slide under on his belly. The fence scraped his back. Razor wire caught his coat, tore fabric. But he made it through, inside the perimeter. He stayed low, moved between buildings. The compound was quiet. No voices, no footsteps. Just the wind and the hum of generators providing power. The central building was larger than the others. 2 stories, reinforced door with a keypad lock. Windows on the second floor curtained, light bleeding through the edges. If Christopher was here, that's where he'd be. Declan approached the door, examined the keypad. Military-grade electronic lock, 6-digit code. Impossible to guess, impossible to hack without specialized equipment. But locks were only as good as the people who maintained them. He tried the obvious combinations first. 000000123 456. The current date, nothing. Then he noticed the wear pattern on the keys. 6 digits had more wear than the others. 14679 0. He tried combinations, methodically, quickly. On the 8th attempt, the lock clicked. The door opened. Declan slipped inside Colt-drawn, scanning corners. The interior was utilitarian, concrete floors, fluorescent lights. A hallway leading deeper into the building, doors on either side. Empty. Too empty. Every instinct screamed trap. But he'd come too far to stop now. He moved down the hall, checking rooms. Storage. Supplies. A small medical bay with examination table and equipment. All empty. At the end of the hall, a staircase led up. Declan climbed. The stairs were metal, his boots loud despite his attempt at stealth. At the top, another hallway. 3 doors. The first door was locked. The second opened another storage room. The third door had a small window at eye level. Declan looked through. Christopher Aldridge sat on a narrow bed wearing hospital scrubs. An IV line ran from his arm to a bag of clear fluid hanging from a pole. The room was white, sterile. Like a hospital, but wrong, too isolated, too silent. The boy was awake, staring at nothing. Declan tried the door. Locked. Electronic keypad, same as the entrance. He used the same combination he'd used downstairs. The lock clicked. He opened the door slowly. Christopher's head turned. His eyes widened. For a moment, the boy just stared. Then recognition flashed across his face. Mr. Ashworth. Hey, buddy. Declan holstered the Colt, raised his hands. I'm here to get you out. Christopher didn't move. They said you wouldn't come. They said nobody would come. They were wrong. The boy's eyes filled with tears, not relief, fear. You shouldn't be here. They'll hurt you. They hurt everyone who tries to help me. Let them try. Declan crossed to the bed, examined the IV saline and something else. A sedative, probably. Keeping the boy docile, he pulled the line free, applied pressure to the insertion site to stop bleeding. Can you walk? I think so. They give me shots, for my blood, the medicine that keeps me from bleeding. Factor 8. Yeah, but they give me other shots too. That make me sleepy. I don't like them. I know. We're going to get you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't give you any more shots. Christopher climbed off the bed. His movements were slow, unsteady. Whatever they'd been giving him had messed with his coordination. But he could stand, could walk. That would have to be enough. Declan gave him his own coat. It was too big, but it would keep the boy warm. Stay close to me. Don't make noise. If I tell you to run, you run. Understand? Christopher nodded. They moved to the door. The hallway was still empty, still too quiet. Declan led the way back to the stairs, Christopher behind him. Every step felt like walking on glass, waiting for the moment it would shatter. They reached the ground floor. The main entrance was 30 feet away, 20 feet, 10. The door burst open. 4 men entered. Military gear, body armor, rifles, not regular army, not FBI, private contractors. The kind you hired when you needed something done that couldn't be traced to official channels. The lead man raised his rifle. On the ground now. Declan shoved Christopher behind him, drew the Colt. I'm taking the boy. You can step aside or you can get shot. Your choice. The lead man didn't lower his weapon. Sir, you're trespassing on a restricted federal facility. You need to come with us. This isn't a federal facility, it's a black site. And that boy is being held against his will. Sir, final warning. Declan, behind you. Christopher's scream came a split second before Declan felt the barrel of a gun press against the base of his skull. Drop the weapon, Mr. Ashworth. He knew that voice. Major Nathaniel Aldridge. Declan's finger tightened on the Colt's trigger. He could spin fire, maybe take the major with him. But Christopher was right there, in the crossfire. He couldn't risk it. Slowly, Declan lowered the Colt, set it on the floor. Kick it away. He did. The pressure against his skull didn't ease. Christopher, the major said, his voice calm, almost gentle. Come here. No, the boy pressed closer to Declan. I won't. You can't make me. Christopher, don't make this difficult. You know what happens when you're difficult. The threat in those words was unmistakable. Declan felt the boy trembling behind him. It's okay, Declan said quietly. I'm not going to let him hurt you. How touching. The major stepped around, keeping his weapon trained on Declan's head. He was dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, jacket, gloves. But he moved like a soldier, precise, efficient, deadly. The washed-up medic playing hero. Did you really think you could walk in here and just take him? I'm taking him out of here. You can't stop me. Can I? The major gestured to the contractors. These men are authorized to use lethal force to protect this facility. One word from me, and they put bullets in both of you. Then you lose your leverage. Without Christopher, your protocol falls apart. The major smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Yes, Christopher is important, but he's not irreplaceable. There are always other children, other politicians who can be manipulated. He glanced at the boy. Christopher, last chance. Come here or watch Mr. Ashworth die. The boy's hand clutched Declan's coat. Don't, Declan said. Whatever he's planning, we'll stop it. Together. You can't stop anything. The major's finger moved to the trigger. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The window behind them exploded. Glass shattered inward. Something metallic hit the floor, bounced hissing. Flashbang grenade. Declan grabbed Christopher, threw himself flat, covering the boy's body with his own. The grenade detonated. Light, sound, pressure wave that felt like being hit by a car. Declan's ears rang. His vision swam, but training overrode confusion. First person to recover wins. He forced himself up, grabbed Christopher, ran for the door. Behind him, shouting, contractors scrambling blind. The major yelling orders. Declan couldn't hear through the ringing, but Declan was already outside into the snow running. Christopher stumbled. Declan scooped him up, carried him. The boy weighed almost nothing. Adrenaline gave him strength he shouldn't have. Gunfire erupted. Bullets snapped past, hit trees, kicked up snow. Declan zigzagged, made himself a harder target. Tree line 50 yards. 40. 30. More gunfire. Closer. He felt the impact before the pain. Something punched his left shoulder, spinning him. He kept his grip on Christopher. Stayed on his feet. 20 yards. 10. They reached the trees. Declan set Christopher down, checked him. You hurt? No, but you are. Blood spread across Declan's coat. Bullet through and through. Painful but survivable. I'm fine. We keep moving. Where the truck was a mile back. He could make it, maybe, but contractors would follow. Vehicles, radios, numbers. He couldn't outrun them, but he didn't need to. Just needed to survive 10 minutes. Declan pulled out his radio, keyed emergency frequency. Hartwell, this is Ashworth. I have the package. Site 17 North Perimeter. Compromised. Taking fire. Need immediate extraction. Static then. Ashworth, this is Hartwell. Extract team 10 minutes out. Can you hold? Will hold. He cut transmission. Looked at Christopher. Boy was shivering, scared, but not crying. Tough kid. We're playing a game, Declan said. Stay alive 10 minutes. Think you can do that? Christopher nodded. Good. Stay behind me. Shooting starts, you hit the ground. Understand? Understood. They moved deeper into trees. Declan's shoulder screamed. Blood ran down his arm, dripped onto snow, leaving trail. Behind them, voices. Flashlight beams cutting darkness. Contractors coming. Declan found defensive position. Cluster of boulders with good sight lines. Positioned Christopher behind largest rock. Took up stance behind cover. His Colt was gone. Left on Site 17 floor. But contractors didn't know that. Federal agents, Declan shouted into darkness. You're trespassing on active crime scene. Stand down or you will be fired upon. Complete bluff. Might buy seconds. Flashlight beams stopped advancing. Voice called back. You're bleeding out, Ashworth. Give us the boy and we'll let you walk. Can't do that? Then you're both dead. Gunfire erupted. Bullets hammered rocks. Stone chips flew. Declan pressed Christopher lower, shielded him. Shooting stopped. Silence. Then movement. Flanking. 3, maybe 4 men spreading to surround position. Declan checked watch. 8 minutes since extraction call. No weapon. Wounded shoulder. 7-year-old to protect. This would be close. Mr. Ashworth, Christopher's voice small. Yeah, buddy. I'm scared. Me too, but scared's okay. Scared keeps you sharp. Are we going to die? Declan thought about Grenada. Men he'd lost. Promises made and broken. Not today, he said. Figure appeared left. Declan picked up rock, threw hard. Caught contractor in face. Man went down cursing. Another figure. Right side. Closer. Declan grabbed branch sharp end forward, drove into man's leg. Contractor screamed, fell. But more coming. Too many. Out of time. Then Declan heard it, sound he'd been waiting for. Helicopter rotors. Contractors heard too. Looked up confused. 2 Blackhawks swept over tree-lined searchlights blazing. One touched down, clearing near Site 17. Other hovered above Declan's position, rappel lines dropping. 4 figures fast roped down. Military gear. Professional movements. Colonel Vesper Hartwell hit ground first, rifle up, scanning sectors. Ashworth sound off. Here behind rocks. Hartwell's team secured perimeter seconds. Contractors outnumbered and outgunned threw down weapons. Hartwell reached Declan's position, assessed shoulder. You look like hell. Feel worse, but kid's safe. She looked at Christopher, expression softened. Hey there, you must be Christopher. I'm Colonel Hartwell. We're getting you home. Not to Uncle Nate, Christopher said quickly. Please, not to him. Not to him, I promise. 2 medics appeared. One worked Declan's shoulder, other checked Christopher. Boy dehydrated, sedated, but otherwise unharmed. Hartwell helped Declan to feet. Silas got files out. We have everything. Kidnappings, protocol, Operation Weather Vane, all of it. The Major, in custody. So is Senator Aldridge. FB, I raided his office 2 hours ago. When you present evidence of child trafficking and conspiracy to Congress, even senators lose immunity. It's over. Not yet, but it will be. They walked to helicopter. Christopher, already strapped in, wrapped thermal blankets. Declan climbed in beside him. As Black Hawk lifted off, he looked down Site 17. Contractors on knees, hands behind heads. Facility that didn't exist, swarming federal agents. Christopher leaned against Declan's good shoulder. Thank you, boy whispered. You're welcome, buddy. They said nobody would come for me, said I wasn't important enough. They were wrong. You're important. Every kid is. Helicopter banked south toward Coldwater, toward safety. 3 weeks later, Declan stood outside the Frosted Ladle watching the last news van pack up and leave. The story had broken big. Senator Griffin Aldridge arrested on federal charges, conspiracy, child endangerment, obstruction of justice. Major Nathaniel Aldridge, court-martialed, facing life in military prison. The Coldwater Protocol exposed in every newspaper from Montana to D.C. 6 other families had come forward, children who'd been used the same way Christopher had. Pawns in a game they didn't understand, played by men who saw them as assets instead of human beings. The defense bill, the one that would have created the senator's private intelligence agency, had died in committee, quietly, without fanfare. The way bad ideas died when the people pushing them got arrested. Christopher was with his mother now. The senator's wife, who'd had no knowledge of the protocol, had filed for divorce within 48 hours of her husband's arrest. She'd taken their son somewhere far from Washington. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they could both heal. Declan had visited once in the hospital right after the rescue. Christopher had smiled when he saw him, a real smile, not the drugged blank stare from the photograph. The boy had been sitting up in bed, color back in his cheeks, working on something with crayons. I made this for you, Christopher had said, holding out a piece of paper. It was a drawing. Crayon stick figures, one tall and one small, standing in front of a building with a sign that said, Diner, in shaky letters. The tall figure had a coffee cup in one hand. The small figure was holding the tall figure's other hand. At the bottom, in careful block letters, My Hero. Declan had that drawing now framed and hanging on the wall of his apartment, right next to his old pararescue photo, the one with 3 men grinning at the camera, rifles slung over their shoulders, palm trees in the background. 2 of those men were dead. The third had finally figured out how to live again. You planning to stand out here all day, or are you going to let me freeze to death? Silas Brennan walked up carrying 2 cups of coffee. He'd been staying in Coldwater for the past week, helping with the investigation, tying up loose ends, making sure every piece of evidence was documented, cataloged, airtight. Just thinking, Declan said, taking one of the cups. Dangerous habit. So you keep telling me. They stood together in the cold breath, fogging in the December air, watching the town go back to normal. Slowly. carefully, the way small towns did after something big happened. Hartwell put in her retirement papers, Silas said after a moment. 20 years was enough. She figures she's done her part. What's she going to do? Travel, maybe. Write a book. Spend time with her grandkids. Silas took a sip of his coffee. She offered you a job, you know. Declan looked at him. I'm not military anymore. Consultant, civilian contractor. She's building a new unit before she leaves Joint Task Force Guardian. Investigates operations like the Cold Water Protocol. Makes sure this kind of thing never happens again. Silas paused. She wants people who give a damn. People who'll do the right thing even when it costs them. Sounds like a good way to make enemies. You've already got enemies, December. Might as well have a paycheck to go with them. Oh, Declan thought about that. About Christopher. About the 6 other children. About how many more there might be that they didn't know about yet. I'll think about it, he said. Don't think too long. The world's got plenty of kids who need saving. Silas clapped him on the shoulder, the good one, and started to walk away. Then he stopped, turned back. You saved that kid, December. You could have walked away. Most people would have, but you didn't. Wasn't a choice. It's always a choice. That's what makes it matter. Silas walked away, leaving Declan alone with his coffee and his thoughts. The bell above the diner door chimed. Declan turned. A woman stood in the doorway. Mid-30s, professional clothes, a nervous expression. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Excuse me, she said. Are you Declan Ashworth? That's right. My name is Rebecca Morrison. My daughter. Her voice caught. She took a breath, tried again. My daughter is missing. The police say she ran away, but I know she didn't. I know someone took her. And I heard what you did for the Aldridge boy. I heard you don't give up on people. Declan looked at her eyes, saw the fear there, the desperation, the fragile, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would listen. He thought about Christopher's drawing, about the words, my hero. He thought about the men in Grenada, about second chances. Come inside, he said. Tell me about your daughter. Rebecca Morrison followed him into the diner. She sat at the counter, pulled out a photo. A girl maybe 12 years old smiling at the camera. Brown hair, freckles. The kind of kid who should be worried about homework and soccer practice, not whatever darkness had reached out and taken her. Her name is Emma, Rebecca said, her voice shaking, and she's everything to me. Declan took the photo, studied it. Another child, another family in crisis. Another chance to do what he'd failed to do in Grenada. Save the people who needed saving. Tell me everything, he said. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. The smallest detail might be the one that matters. Rebecca Morrison started to talk, and Declan Ashworth listened. The phone on the wall rang. Declan held up a finger 1 minute and crossed to answer it. Frosted ladle. Ashworth, it's Hartwell. The colonel's voice was brisk, professional. Have you thought about my offer? He looked at Rebecca Morrison, at the hope in her eyes, at the photo of Emma on the counter. When do I start? Tomorrow, if you can manage it. I've got a case that just came in. Senator's daughter, 14 years old, missing from a boarding school in Virginia. Local police aren't taking it seriously. They think she's a runaway. They're wrong. I know they are. That's why I need you. A pause. I'm building something here, Declan. Something that matters. People who'll stand up when everyone else looks away. I think you're one of those people. I'll be there. Send me the file. Already on its way. Meet me in D.C. on Monday. We'll go over everything. Another pause. And Declan, thank you for Christopher, for all of it. Just doing what needed doing. That's exactly why I want you on the team. The line went dead. Declan hung up the phone, turned back to Rebecca Morrison. I'm going to help you find your daughter, he said. But first I need you to tell me everything. When did you last see her? Who were her friends? Anyone new in her life? Anyone who made you uncomfortable? She nodded, wiping her eyes, started talking. Declan took notes on the back of a napkin. Names, dates, details. The kind of information that built cases and found missing children. The kind of work he was born to do. The weeks turned to months. Declan took the job. Hartwell's new unit, Joint Task Force Guardian, operated out of a small office in D.C., but Declan still lived in Coldwater, still ran the diner. The work came to him. Rebecca Morrison's daughter Emma was found 3 weeks later. Alive. Scared, but alive. She'd been held by a trafficking ring operating out of Spokane, targeting girls from single-parent homes. Declan and Silas brought her home. Watched Rebecca collapse in tears when she saw her daughter. Watched Emma run into her mother's arms. Watched them hold each other like they'd never let go. There were others at After Emma, a congressman's son in Virginia held for ransom by people who thought political connections meant easy money. They were wrong. A general's daughter in Colorado taken by a cult that specialized in recruiting vulnerable teenagers. Declan got her out, got all 12 of them out, a diplomat's twins in Maryland, a doctor's son in Oregon, a teacher's daughter in Nevada. Children used as leverage, as pawns, as assets. Each case was different. Each case was the same. And each time Declan remembered Christopher's words traced in condensation on a diner table, "Help me. Some promises you kept, no matter the cost." 6 months after Coldwater. Christopher Aldridge stood in a courtroom in Washington, D.C. He was 8 now, taller than he'd been in December, steadier. He wore a suit that fit him properly. His mother had made sure of that, and when the judge asked him questions, he spoke in a clear voice that didn't shake. "Can you identify the man who kidnapped you?" Christopher looked across the courtroom, looked directly at Major Nathaniel Aldridge, seated at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit flanked by 2 federal marshals. The major stared back. No expression, no remorse. Christopher pointed. "That's him, Uncle Nate." "And can you tell the court what he did to you?" Christopher told them. "All of it. The cabin in the woods, the men with masks, the injections that made him sleep, the tracking chip implanted in his shoulder, the terror of waking up in that white room alone, not knowing if anyone would ever come." He told them about Uncle Nate's phone calls, about hearing the words asset and protocol and acceptable losses. He told them about Mr. Ashworth, about the diner, about the warmth and the blankets and the man who'd looked at him like he mattered, about the words he'd traced in the condensation, "Help me." He told them because he was brave. He told them because Declan Ashworth had taught him that telling the truth mattered even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. When Christopher finished, the courtroom was silent. Not the silence of indifference, the silence of horror, of people realizing what had been done to a 7-year-old child in the name of power and politics and protocol. The judge cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was hard. "Major Nathaniel Aldridge, you are hereby remanded to federal custody pending sentencing. Given the severity of the charges and the evidence presented, this court recommends life imprisonment without possibility of parole. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Christopher's mother pulled him into a hug, told him she was proud, told him he was brave, told him it was over now. And it was. In the back of the courtroom, Declan Ashworth stood between Colonel Vesper Hartwell and Silas Brennan watching. "Life without parole," Hartwell said quietly. "The major will die in prison." "Good," Declan said. "The senator got 20 years. No parole. They're sending him to a federal supermax in Colorado." "Better." "And the 6 other families, all of them are in therapy, getting help, moving on." Hartwell looked at him. "You did that, Declan. You started this. If you hadn't saved Christopher, none of this would have come to light." "I didn't do it alone." "No, but you did it first. That's what matters." Christopher turned around, caught Declan's eye across the courtroom, smiled. Declan nodded once. Promise kept. Christopher's mother mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Declan nodded again. Then Christopher and his mother were gone, walking out of the courthouse into the spring sunshine, into whatever life came next. A life without fear, without protocols, without men who saw children as assets. "Come on," Hartwell said. "I'm buying lunch. There's a place around the corner that makes the best pastrami in D.C. "I thought you were retired," Declan said. "Retired from the army, not from eating." She smiled. "Besides, we need to talk about the next case. Senator's daughter in Virginia, the one I mentioned. Local PD finally admitted they're in over their heads. They're asking for our help. When do we start? Tomorrow, but today we celebrate. Small victories, Declan. You take them when you can." They walked out of the courthouse together into the bright May afternoon. More cases waiting, more battles to fight, more children who needed someone to refuse to look away. But today they'd won, and that was enough. Declan Ashworth had come to Coldwater, Montana to hide from the world, to run from the ghosts of Grenada, from the faces of the men he couldn't save, from the weight of promises broken and lives lost. He'd wanted quiet, anonymity, a life where the only thing he had to worry about was whether the coffee was fresh and the grill was clean. Instead, he'd found his war. But this time it was a war worth fighting. Sometimes the things you run from are the things you need most. Sometimes the people you save end up saving you. And sometimes a man running a failing diner in the middle of nowhere, Montana, becomes exactly the hero the world needs. Not because he's special, not because he's trained or talented or blessed with supernatural gifts, but because when a child asked for help, he refused to look away. Because he remembered that every life mattered. Every child deserved protection. Every promise should be kept. The Cold Water Protocol would be told for years after this. A cautionary tale about power and corruption and the price of unchecked ambition. About men who thought they could use children as tools without consequence. About the system that let them try. But for Declan Ashworth, it would always be simpler than that. It was about a 7-year-old boy who traced 2 words in condensation. Help me, and a man who answered. Everything else was just details. Declan learned something in that blizzard in that alley behind a failing diner, kneeling in the snow beside a dying child. He learned that the world doesn't always need heroes. Sometimes it just needs people who refuse to look away. People who see suffering and say, not on my watch. People who keep promises even when keeping them costs everything. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.